Joe Ferdinands are constant favorites in fronting the local music scene, with performances for special events, playing with other homegrown musicians.
Organized together with the New Night Festival, the National Heritage Board. Every year they have a night festival and we are very proud to be part of that. And tonight we wanted to celebrate the original songs from the era of the Singapore original songs from the 70s and 80s. So what best is to get Mel and Joe previously from the Gypsies and from as their own band to come and perform with us with Raw Earth. Basically that's all it is. We celebrate music of the past, songs of the past. They are exceptional. They were part of the scene in the 70s, 80s and on. And what's good about them is that they kept the passion alive. They kept performing. They didn't stop. And they are really a good example for us younger musicians saying, you know what, it's possible to live your passion. And people like them, it's necessary to have people like them to be an inspiration. And also maybe to share with the younger Singaporeans about the past also, about the bands that came before that, before this era. And basically we'll talk a lot about the songs that were hits on radio and on TV and things.
With singing and composing in the Ferdinands bloodline, it is only natural for Mel's daughter Gabrielle to follow in her father's footsteps.
I've been singing since I was about 4 years old, and I'm studying full-time now, but I still sing once a week so that I keep the passion and the dream alive. I've learned pretty much everything I know about music from my dad, and I'm a bit of an old soul. I like a lot of old music as opposed to the new stuff. I don't hate the new stuff, but I prefer the old stuff. Initially, as I was growing up, I always found that my dad was very popular. Every time we went out shopping and all that, he'd be like, "Hey Mel," and someone would see him and recognize him, and I'm like, why does everyone know my dad initially? And later on I got to know about the history and why and all that.
Gabrielle was in a taxi once when the taxi driver recognized her as well, because she was singing.
Yeah, I was singing in the taxi.
She was singing along and I asked you.
I said, oh, last time, the music industry, there was this and that. And I said, oh yeah, my dad used to play, back in the day. And he's like, oh, what band was he from? So I said, Gypsy. What? And then it turned out like the guy knew my dad from way back, 25 years, more than 25 years ago. And I was like, wow, okay. So I was, shell-shocked, but it was very interesting. I like things like that where, your paths cross and then you tend to find out something about the person. And you're like, oh, right, you knew my dad, small world. So yeah, it's always been fun for me.
How similar is Gabrielle's songwriting style to her father?
A lot of the time I always wonder, why you always write such sad songs? Like, why can't I write happy songs? But I can understand where he's coming from. He wants to, tug at the heartstrings and everything. So I really admire him for his songwriting abilities and the way that he can, no matter how many times he sings the song, he still delivers the same emotion. That's something I'm trying to learn from him as well when I sing. For me, I think it's definitely inspired me to write my own stuff, but the style of music is probably different to me because I like a lot of silly things. I'm very whimsical. I like to write about food and candy and unicorns and things like that. So I try to tie it in with real feelings and real experiences. So as much as my dad's music is very much a very realistic kind of look at life, mine is very much like fantasy world and all that. So it has inspired me, but I also still put my own spin on it, on my own music.
But Gabrielle writes about butterflies in the tummy and chocolate chips and cheese and chocolate and all that sort of thing. Also, it's something refreshing which I never think of doing. So and I just encourage you to keep doing that. Because there's no hard and fast rules about you have to write like this. I wouldn't want to do that. I don't want to impose my thoughts or my principles of songwriting onto her. I think she has to develop her own style. I think even when it comes to values, you try to share your values, but you can't impose them. Because because everyone has a different take on what the value system should be. So I think like with Gabriel, I would like to think that from the time she was being raised, she's been nurtured and looked after in a certain way that it will rub off and it will become part of her value system as well.
Many times I walked away, but you keep coming back to me.
What about their personality? What would be a common trait between father and daughter?
Been patient with you.
I think we're both very sensitive people. So we always tend to, get very it's like very precious about certain things. So I think I've taken that from him, as well as his corny sense of humor. Sometimes my friends are always like, oh my god, what kind of jokes are you telling? I was like, I got it from my dad, So I think that's one of the main things as well, humor. He's very positive, very optimistic a lot of the time. Sometimes it's a bit tiring because I'm like, no, it's not always good, Dad. But he's always like, no, just keep going, don't give up. And so it's a lot of the time it's very uplifting, because when you're feeling down in the dumps, he's always there to kind of bring you out of it, even if it's with a really bad joke. But at least, his spirit is always, how do I say, it's always looking on the bright side. So that's a very good thing.
I've often shared my concerns with Gabriel in terms of how it looks, how difficult it can be, and how dirty it can be as well, because there's also that side of it, where you have to sometimes deal with unscrupulous agents, managers, band members even, But I would like to think that, at her age now, that, whatever guidance she needed was given throughout, so that she's in a position that she can make a good decision herself.
Be it singing in the opera or fronting local music, it is always remarkable when that passion is evidently shared and cultivated within the family.